full of snag I've been through. I'm a living while I'm living, to the Father I will pray. Only Him know how we get through. Every day it's only I in the price. I'm a leg we have to pay while our leaders play. All I see people are rip and a rob.
Talk on this second day of May 2018, which means that one day ago, Guyana marked Labor Day, May 1. As you know, the day is respected and celebrated for the struggles of workers over the last century and over the decades. Today's newspapers, Wednesday, May 2nd, the Starbuck News has some rather depressing kinds of headlines. For example, on page 1, it has two young ladies with their placards, "Respect the grievance procedure," and another one, "Work harder for the working class." Incredibly, on another page, we have Cabinet waiting on word from Finance Minister, according to President Granger, the Finance Minister's boss. Concerns were expressed about unemployment statistics and the call for the establishment of a Ministry of Labour. It's been the first time in the history since self-government, which preceded independence, that Guyana is without a substantive Ministry of Labour. It's a background that perhaps we would have preferred not to have for this evening's discussion, with two veteran trade unionists, and the word veteran is usually used to mean, respectfully, age and aging. They are Norris Witter and Mr. Lincoln Lewis. Mr. Norris Witter.
Thank you very much, Chris, for having
Mr.
me.
Lincoln Lewis. Lincoln, thank you. I see you still in your May Day shirt.
I put on this shirt because this is the blood, representing the blood of the workers in this
Blood
country.
of the working people. Well, was it in vain? When you look at these headlines, when you look at where we are, when you look at the fact that Guyana was the first country in the Commonwealth to have
The British Empire,
in the British Empire.
yeah, that have had a trade union.
Yes. Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow.
Yeah.
Our founding leaders, Jagan and Burnham, both honed their skills in the labour movement. Where are we now?
You want to go first?
Let me first of all respond to what Chris said. Whether the labor and the sacrifices of those in the past, Critchlow, Eden, Stonewall Jackson, or J.H. Polydor, whether Burnham, Jagan, Hubbard, Janet Jagan too, throw that in, right?
Richard Ishmael.
Jane Phillips Gates, Ishmael, right? Whether their labors were in vain. Now, the fact of the matter is that from time immemorial, societies were made up and continues to be made up of persons of various base instincts, right? You will have the intellectuals, you'll have the sane, you'll have the insane, and and the crazy, and we can go on like that, right?
You also had have the courageous,
the courageous,
and those who are willing to stand up,
and the cowards, and so on, right? So we must appreciate that fact. I do not think that the labor of those persons have been in vain. As a matter of fact, I think it is no less a person than Sir Frederick Douglass, who is on record as saying that throughout history, there has been no real progress without struggles, right? But unfortunately, what happens is that while some are struggling courageously, there are others like roaches who are prepared to do nothing but enjoy the sweat and the blood of those who struggle. So that is my quick response to you on that.
And I'll come back to you. But Lincoln?
The struggle was not in vain. It was important that they struggled at that time, and it is important that we continue to struggle in our time. We are standing on the shoulders of the men and women. If struggle was bad, or those sacrifices were bad, the sacrifices I'm referring to preceded us, then many of us would, if the slaves did not struggle while slavery in itself was legal, they recognized that it was not in their interest and they struggled against it. Just the same, the indentured, they struggled against indentureship. And apart from that, what we have had, those who struggle against colonialism. Our time now is to struggle against the children and grandchildren of those who fought indentureship and colonialism. They have become the new masters. So we will have to struggle.
Yes, no question about it. They have struggled. The question is, and as you said, Lincoln, using that wonderful phrase, standing on the shoulders of those who went before us, no less an orator than Barack Obama used similar kind of language. But when you think, as I said, for the first time in the history of this country, even as a colony, and as you yourself said yesterday, we have not had a Ministry of Labor. For the first 3 years of a new government, we have not had a single piece of pro-labor, pro-poor, pro-social legislation. We have our teachers calling for benefits that I guess they think are their just dues. And the president saying he waiting on a minister that he is appointed to provide some kind of answers. You have a commitment to return to collective bargaining. You have young people, these young people, as we stand on the threshold of this petro-state era, we are talking of some very, very basic things. We are faced with a significant decline in union numbers. Unions are no longer seen. Some of them you hear once every year when government announces maybe a wage increase. And that's it. So where is this standing on the shoulders? Where is it advancing the cause?
All right. The people who make up this government, or the cabinet, they are historians and students of history.
Only a few of them.
I said they are historians and students of history.
Maybe they didn't read.
Right? Because they are aware of the strength and weaknesses of a strong labor movement. And their views about governance may not be philosophically in sync with the trade union. Their utterances that they need to have a strong and united labor movement in this country, it is just words. Why I say that? Let me say to you that trade unions, strong trade unions or trade unions in general, flourish during a period when the democratic processes are respected. And by that I mean the laws, respect for laws, respect for constitution, respect for collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is the bedrock in industrial relation, a process that the unions participate in. Collective bargaining is important. If you have had a situation where foreign nationals running companies here are not prepared to respect the laws, and the government either turn a Nelson eye to saying very clear to them that you're in breach of this law and you need to use your political, you're in breach of this law and you need to do A, B, C, D. Is one way of giving credence to transgressing the rights of citizens and the violating of the laws. You have a situation where collective bargaining means not that we meet at the table, but we, at the end of time, we agree and sign an agreement. In this process here, where the government itself is not involved in giving in the process, is not involved in giving the process an opportunity to work for the signing of an agreement, is one way of undermining the trade union. So what I want to say to you, that the activities that the previous and the current government are involved in is an activity that is totally anti-trade union. And on that premise, I always say that the trade union is a microcosm of what happens in the society. And they aid and abet it. They don't want strong trade unions. What has to happen is that workers got to take back their union. Because in the first place, and secondly, we need to educate, we need a massive education program for workers to understand that the union takes precedence over the political loyalty when it comes to the issue of bread and butter. So there where we are. It's a difficult time.
Yeah, but it's a difficult time, but you see, I sense a bit of contradiction in what you're saying.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you say that we struggle, and on the other hand, you say, "Oh well, we need democratic culture."
Can I make this point to you, Chris? Let me just make this point to you, Chris.
Okay, carry on.
Let me make this point to you. The trade union is not like a political party. The trade union activities are guided by rules and laws. Political parties don't have rules and laws. What they can do or say, as how a politician will stand up and say, we have collective bargaining. We have collective bargaining in the system. When you know for a fact that collective bargaining do not exist, right? We can't go as a trade unionist and say we have collective bargaining. Because we are accounting. It is the trade union, you got to understand, the trade union is the only mass-based organization that has continuous membership. The politicians don't have that. The political parties don't have that. We have to account. If we go, when you write a collective labor agreement, it has you have to account avoidance and settlement of dispute. How you're going to avoid it. A collective labor agreement is say, stage 1 what it will be if a grievance arises, stage 2 what it will be, and stage 3 what it will be, or stage 4, some have stage 5. But in the law of this land, it says that if a collective labor agreement, you do not say that a collective labor agreement is illegal, is not legal and binding in the courts of this land, then it is legal and binding. So when you don't sign that, it's a legal document you have.
Yes.
The politicians don't have that, right? So we have to operate within the confines of the law when we prosecute anything, right? The point I'm making to you, if the government who hold the state machinery, right? That government is not prepared to make sure that it polices the industrial relations system. Where do we go?
But isn't that the whole basis of struggle? When there is non-compliance with moral, you correctly pointed out, at one time slavery was considered legal. It was even considered religious and in keeping with biblical pronouncements. But yet, change only comes about by struggle.
Yes. There's other point, Chris, another perspective, is that the genesis of the labor movement, right, is rooted in the extreme exploitation of workers by the employers, to the extent where it became intolerable and the workers became rebellious. They fought against this exploitation and so on, right? I think that those employers, whether government or private, who inculcates the thought that whether people or workers have lost the will to struggle, they are making a very serious mistake, right? I'll tell you why. Because people, and then if one look at history, you would see where a people once considered to be docile, faced with extreme abuses, have rebelled to the extent where they've created revolutions, right? Arab Spring, an example. And you can go even beyond that, right?
Might I politely tell you, the Arab Spring did not last very long.
Well, yes.
It wilted pretty quickly.
But most rebellion and revolution were as the result of an accumulation of abuses against persons who were considered by the abusers to be docile. You understand? Now, you made a very significant observation in the sense that the political parties grew out of the labor movement. First political party, PUP, 1950. Bonham, Jagan, Janet Jagan, Hubbard, Ashton Chase, and so on. Labor leaders, right? After...
There's some historical issue as to whether Burnham was part of that initial movie. Was not.
He was not part of the PSC
yes,
in 1948.
Yeah.
But in 1950, he was one of the founders of the PPP, right? And very often, a lot of persons conveniently omits that he was one of the founders of the PPP and held a very significant position too. But we're not here to discuss that. Now, what you will find is that during the tenure of those persons, there was some sympathy towards the movement, even though there may have been conflict from time to time and even clashes and so on, right? But the fact that they came out of the movement, right, there was some sentimental attachment to it. Now, within recent times, what we have seen, starting with Jack Dew, well, Donald, I mean, he had his time within the movement and so on, but one can't forgive him because I do not think he was his own man when he was handpicked to be president, right? He was just the puppet there. But Jack Dew to Current, these are guys that have never been involved in the movement. So could you expect them to have any sympathy, any love, and so on? Very little, right? As a matter of fact, they would, I think to a large extent, right, they would wish to see the movement as being an organization that is compliant, right? One that they can say, well, when they say jump, how high, move how fast, right? But that is not the way, that is not the nature of the movement. You understand? This is a movement of agitation, advocacy, and struggle, right? Now, I do not think that a lot of leaders, political leaders, are comfortable with the nature of this movement in terms of struggle.
But
and so
the
on.
establishment is never comfortable with the labor movement. What
Well,
are you asking for?
Good, but I think that labor leaders need to come to terms with that reality.
But I have in front of me two of Guyana's most prominent labor leaders. So it's not an out-of-body experience we're talking about, it's you.
We are aware of that. We are aware of that. But I think one of the difficulties that we have, right? You can remember that while we may be aware, we are not the movement.
You're the leaders of the movement, though.
We may be, what you may want to say, important or significant players, but we are not the movement. You understand?
In your respective unions, you are the leaders.
Right. You understand? So we'll have some degree of influence.
Much more than that.
So there, right? I think that the challenge we have right now, right, is one of educating the workers generally, right, as to what ought to be their role within this current dispensation, right? Because I'll tell you what, this thing we're talking about here is not a static thing, you know. It's very dynamic.
When you say current dispensation, could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Okay. One is that we are in a new era, a global era. That's one, right? Where what one says which requires some level of paradigm shift, right, in order to effectively respond to the changing global situation as one. Two, an understanding of the political behavior of your political leaders within this current dispensation. Are they prepared? Look, we have the issue, for instance, like of the renaming of the Ministry of Labor. It is an indictment on the current administration, an indictment.
Lincoln would say there is no Ministry of Labor. There's not merely a renaming.
Well, they have a Department of Labor.
Yeah, department.
Yes, but,
which is much less
yeah,
than a
but
ministry.
because social protection is supposed to be a department of the Ministry of Labor. You understand? And you see, the question is, was this a deliberate move in order to miniaturize, right? Or to devalue the role of labor as a social partner within society?
Let me bring in Lincoln. You have been giving thought to this matter. You've expressed this issue about the ministry for a long time. Would you like to answer his question? Was this a deliberate move to miniaturize and play toy almost with the labor movement?
I want to tell you that I believe so. In my opening statements, I speak of that the people who are in the cabinet comprised of historians and students of history, right? It's a deliberate act. It's a deliberate act to pay to say to labor that you are not important. You find it so important to put a Ministry of Business, but it's representing an interest group, the business group. But you find it not worthy to put a Ministry of Labor to address the problems of the workers, the working man and woman in this country. It's a deliberate act.
Which in fact, and if you think about it, even though one does not want to create an adversarial landscape, business is associated with employers, and labor is associated with employees.
Yeah.
So here you're empowering one side, and you're disempowering the other.
It's a fact. That's how they operate.
Where does struggle come into this? What were the messages when you looked at the people yesterday as they came down the streets and you saw those placards and pickets? What message did you think at that time those persons were trying to convey to the leadership of the labor movement and to the leadership of the country?
It is to say to them very clearly, these are our priorities. These are our priorities. Don't look at the other issues now. These are the priorities. This is what's important to us, and this is what we want.
You see, there's another thing too. I hear a lot of people saying that this is one of the largest rallies we have seen within recent times and so on. Let me tell you.
Yesterday?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what. I think it's a situation that all of us need to carefully analyze. Even the government, right? Because the response...
You would say even the government, or most importantly the government?
Right. Because...
No, it is a question.
Most importantly the government, right? Because the response by the people, right, can be seen as one that was based on either the action or inaction of the government in addressing serious concerns as it pertains to the livelihood and the welfare of those persons. Look, I observe where a number of former employees of Gaisuku, they're no longer employees of Gaisuku, right? But they were workers and members of the union. They are still aggrieved. They came out in their numbers.
Because the working class is made up not only of employed persons, but unemployed persons as well.
Definitely. And they came out in numbers. So, action by governments can galvanize people into action. Right?
Action by government or...
Action and or inaction. In the sense that whatever is done or not done, that affects the livelihood and the welfare of workers generally, can galvanize them into action.
Lincoln.
And that may be one of the reasons. That may be not one of the reasons why the turnout yesterday was more than what it was in previous years. So I think it's a cause, as I said earlier, not only for us to analyze, right, but also more importantly for the government to do so.
What's your what do you feel when you see these ministers marching on Labor Day, and knowing, when you realize and you consider your own position as to how these persons as employers, because these ministers are their employers. Where do they fit in to this Labor Day expression for the demand for change and respect for the working class and respect the grievance procedure and working harder for the working class? Where did you see that?
Let me tell you this. Yesterday, there are some messages that were sent there that we need to stop and analyze. This May Day, we did no public mobilization where we get on talk shows and television and radio and so on to energize workers to come out. But while we didn't do that, people came out in numbers. We need to check what is responsible for it. It has become now maybe a fashion for ministers to turn out. You know what people like in this country? The common man like to be near the people who they believe have power, or can get them something. They can get near to them and talk to them. But when they don't talk to them, what they say to Witter, myself, Miss McDonald and others, Patrick Yard, whosoever they meet as a unionist, is something different to what they're saying to those ministers. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't believe the ministers get a feel, their finger on the pulse down there. The same people who will turn out at their meetings and their rallies will come back to tell you how disappointing they are. So when you hear Witter or McDonald or me talking, you're talking based on how the people see a government. When I see the government, I say, okay, well, that is from, they believe, they do not understand this, that Burnham and Jagan were given a special place in the movement. Burnham, regardless of what you may say, he served as president and president general of the Guyana Labor Union.
Yes.
Chelly started in the Sawmill and Forest Workers Union, and then he come into sugar, and he became president of GAU, right? Those two men who were political allies and become political rivals, they cut their teeth in public life in the trade unions.
Is there any person
So what they're doing now, they believe that they are born a Majegan
without having cut their teeth anywhere?
without even being committed to what they're doing.
Does any one of them have any history in the trade union movement?
I am thinking it may be hard. At one time, I believe that when many members of parliament pass through go into the hollow halls of the parliament there, some of them don't even know that it's a scriptural statue of there.
But you've asked a very significant...
That's a serious...
You have asked a very significant question, because on the opposite bench, you have two well-known trade unionists, Kamal Chan and Gillian Borton. Right?
Yes.
I can't think or consider of anyone on the government side that has such a person.
Let's not appear to be knocking the government only. Tell me something. What message did the trade union leaders send yesterday in their big flowery speeches? And Lincoln, you're a great orator. You really are. But what did you say to people yesterday, a year that has marked some of the largest incidents of retrenchment in the history of this country? What was the difference in your message yesterday compared with previous years?
My message yesterday was the old issue of bringing the awareness of the workers of this country on the issue of the transgressing of rights here and the violations that are taking place are taking place in the system, and more so highlighting that commitments were given by the present administration and they are not honoring those commitments.
Why do you think they're not honoring those commitments?
Because I believe people say to me, when I raise it with them, they tell me that it's politics. And people believe, politicians today believe that they can go there and make any outlandish, what we call
promises.
Promises, and when they do that, they don't necessarily have to do it. It's about votes.
But a commitment to return to free collective bargaining isn't an outlandish promise. That's a requirement of your very constitution.
Yes, but why I consider it outlandish is because they didn't believe in what they were saying. That's what I'm saying. Look, the Public Service Union and the government, they have not, like the last encounter that they have had, they have not had 5 sessions between the two parties. I have been at trade unions for so many years, and I remember myself sitting down at table attempting to negotiate a collective labor agreement, and it took me some time, more than a year. You work tediously to make sure that these things happen.
You know what is interesting? I remember around the mid-90s, Chetty Jagan was president, and he was in fact partly leading some negotiations, but he didn't, to his credit, he didn't take sides. He said, Ram, or Jordan and Ram, you go and look at those numbers and come back and tell us. Where is that kind of... You recall that, don't you?
Yes, and apart from that, when there was a deadlock between the GPSU and the government, Chidi Jagan again, he appointed the Bash Commission, you understand? To look at the issue. Now, sometimes I wonder whether it is because of the background of the persons who make up the government that is creating this difficulty.
But as Lewis just said, Mr. Lewis just said, you're either a historian or you're a student of history.
But the guys, they're not creative too. They're not creative.
Or they'll learn nothing.
I tell you, they seem to be on learning faster than they're learning.
Where do we go from here? You know, you've been involved in an issue, your own union, I think it is, with Rusal.
Yeah.
Clear violation. The people wouldn't even talk to you.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of insult is that? You go into somebody else's country, you violate the law, and refuse to talk to the trade union leader?
You know, I'll tell you something.
You can't even get into Russia.
Yeah, let me tell you this, and this is where I always believe that this could not have happened under Burnham. Could never have happened. It could not have happened under even Chetty, because they would have taken a very nationalistic position. You know what these people did? To refuse to respect the law and talk with the trade union. By not talking with the trade union, you know what they did? These people that challenge the sovereignty of this country.
Absolutely.
Right? And everybody
we sit back and take it.
And spinning around. Right? The other day when I write and I talk about testicular fortitude, when I said that if you don't have it to deal with Rusal, wait until Exxon come. People
and you've improved, right? You've improved, right?
Okay.
We buckled.
Right? The point is that we are at a... We need to... Let me tell you this. Chris, let me tell you something. I always... When you want to be a trade unionist, one of your strengths must be that you're not a compliant person. Trade unionism is about changing and for the improvement in society. That is what the trade union did. The trade union in 1905 challenged the merchant class and the crown. And the struggle started there. Why do people want us to change it now? We must cooperate. Cooperate for what? If the slaves had cooperated, right? We would have been in slavery up to now. Cooperation is a functional thing. I cooperate not to hold me in bondage, but improve my lot.
Not with your oppressors.
Right? That's the story. And too often we believe that that's how we...
You call on the leader of the opposition. I think you call on the PPPC to introduce a motion for the re-establishment of a Ministry of Labour. Don't you think we have a big enough government already? You have ministers looking at bridges. Ministers don't have work to do.
You don't have to change. You appoint a new ministry, but you change the configuration of that ministry.
Yes.
Right? You change the configuration of that ministry, change the name of it. Right? I'm going to tell you something. What is gazetted for labor administration in the national gas, in this government, national gas, is the Minister of Social Protection.
Yes.
As we you understand me? You know, I remember, I've been around a good time.
I know.
Polydor, under Polydor, Bonham had appointed, had made a ministry of manpower and some other thing, labor and so on. He write Bonham, and the next wrong, changing wrong. Bonham changed the ministry and put labor in front.
Yes, yes.
Right? I remember those things. It is not by justice in the trade union asking for. Right?
But every year you go through the PSU goes through this
Ritual.
the ritual, the rain dance about salary increase and make some noise, nothing happens. You march down the streets, make flowery speeches, bashing the lectern and all of that. Nothing changes. Where do we go? Now we're heading into maybe a new period. What's happening? Where does the change come from?
So you see, as I said, that accumulation of abuses leads to rebellion and so on, right? It is in the interest of any government. And before I say that, let me say this. Inherent in this whole concept of collective bargaining is good faith, right? That the parties must enter into these discussions with a good faith, and with a determination to reach agreement.
Can I add another word? Trust?
Oh, that's a big problem. That's a big problem.
No, but I'm suggesting that you need that.
You need it, right? That is woefully lacking, all around, woefully lacking. Now, the fact that the government has been breaking off these negotiations and imposing increases is suggesting very clearly that they have not been entering into these discussions in good faith. I'll tell you something, a serious indictment of this government, You know, this is the only government on record, right, that from day one has been imposing increases.
From day one?
Day one, the government track record as it relates to collective bargaining is terrible.
That's not nice.
Catastrophic.
That's correct, but it's not a good record to claim from day one.
And, it is not good for any of us. It is not good for any of us. Because I believe that, because, you see, Lacan said something yesterday, which I agree. There's a lot of people who believe that oil is a panacea for Guyana's development as well. They talk about oil whether curse or blessing. If we continue to go down this road, there's going to be more curse than blessing, yeah? Because if you look at history is replete with the examples. Resources have been the center of most conflict in the world.
Conflict and corruption.
And corruption, particularly, and within recent times, right? The resource that has been responsible for that is oil and mineral. Oil and mineral, right? And the best protection we can have for Guyana and our resources is the unity of the people. And if the leaders at the social partner level, right, cannot sensibly and wisely sit and arrive at some kind of terms of engagement as how they're going to go forward, we're in serious trouble.
But isn't that true of the labor movement as well?
No.
That you've got division?
Yes, you will have differences of opinion.
No, it's more fundamental than that. Lincoln, it's more fundamental.
Yes, but let me tell you something. While we may have we have divisions about where we sit and where we participate, we are committed to the principles upon which the movement has been built. The question here and what we are guided by is the ILO conventions and those type of things. But let me make this point to you, Chris. Yesterday, We had the PPP on the platform, represented by Gillian Burton. We had Basil Williams representing the government. He's chairman of the PNC. We had Minister Ferguson. We had Minister Cummins. And we had Scott at one point. We had Minister Ali at one point. Let me just make this point to you. Them talking about telling us every day, how we disunited. But the two of them can't sit down publicly to deal with the matter. But we bring them on the platform yesterday.
Even though
this same movement that you said divided, we bring them. When you talk about social cohesion,
even though
we can do it.
Even though in 1997, right, they agreed, the opposition government then agreed, based on the Ormonson Accord, wanted to menu political dialogue. Where's political dialogue?
Good.
But the TUC and the FETO, they are dialoguing. They may not agree on everything, but they agree on substantial. To the extent we're running now for the third consecutive year, we have had joint rallies and march. I mean, that's progress.
Right.
That's progress.
And anytime you see anytime you see everybody agreeing to one thing inside there, you better believe that is mental asylum with there. And we are mad yet.
Well, let me shift a little bit from this labor issue. You will have followed this discussion on the cybercrime bill, and very importantly, clause 18, that has essentially reintroduced, using a cybercrime bill, reintroduce a sedition act. Not against the state, but against the government. Why is the labor movement silent on such, or does the labor movement think that this is a significant cause for concern?
Yes, it's a significant cause for concern. But let me say to you two things. I have written about it. I've written about it.
Yes, you have.
I have
That's
written
correct.
about it. Let me tell you what I am encouraged about. That while we as a trade union, as a movement, running down the track, doing A, B, C, or D, there are other people in society who are taking up D, E, and F. Right? I am encouraged, and I said it in my letter. The first letter that I read was, the first public one I read was on what Ruel Johnson said.
That's correct.
What all these guys are doing, they must be commended. They are complementing the activities or the desires of this movement. We may not have the resources to do all the things, but this bill is important enough for what they raised there is important enough for the survival, or for people like you and me, Norris and others, not being incarcerated for making our voice known. It's a serious piece of legislation, and I'm thinking what could have gone through the heads of those people who put it in there.
Well, what's your position on this cybercrime bill,
My position?
and particularly clause 18?
It's frightening, right? What we are seeing developing here is a movement towards what is referred to as the control of thought, yeah? And whoever can...
Which is anti your constitution.
Yeah. And whoever succeeds in controlling how you think renders you a robot, yeah? They control you.
But as Lincoln is suggesting, it can actually be worse. You're talking about next thing you lose is your liberty because you criticize the government.
Definitely, it is worse than slavery. It actually is worse than slavery.
Well, there are a few things that are worse. I can't think of anything that's worse than slavery, actually. But it's bad. Now, what... To Ruel Johnson's credit, yes. But Ruel Johnson, as I recall, is a member of the AFC. The AFC, through its vice president and former leader, Kemraj Ramjatan, played a very prominent role in this piece of legislation. And that seems to have been kept quiet. Kemraj Ramjatan was the main player in this legislation, or certainly a main player. At the select committee level, he was a main player. That, he's a lawyer.
What are they thinking about?
It's frightening. You know why it's frightening? I'm going to tell you why it's frightening. Kemraj Ramjatan did pro bono work for me, for the trade union people.
Not forget the thing about power, you know,
right?
Don't forget the thing about power.
Williams, the Attorney General, did pro bono work for the trade union. Basil, there are times we get media where we say, Basil, we want a donation for this or a donation for that. And you could have depended that donation was to come. He asked you much and so on. I am asking myself, how can these guys know the things that they fought against with us? They are now embracing it. Is it an oversight?
No.
Let me walk away believing it's an oversight.
No, please don't put that on the air at all. This is no oversight.
Young President
I can tell you that people, I've spoken to a few ministers, they are actually defending this.
The what?
They're defending this privately, chap. They are defending this.
Yeah, like what you were saying. Young President George Bush says that power can be very corrosive and obnoxious. Not everybody can manage power constructively, you know. Power can either be used constructively or destructively, right? So it's a very thin line. I'm afraid that some are finding it very difficult to tread that line.
Well, Lincoln has just mentioned two names: Basil Williams and Kemraj Ramjatan.
Yeah.
These are two seasoned lawyers. They must know. They have read Halsbury, they have read all kinds of constitutional texts. They know the implication of this kind of legislation, this kind of principle. And if you read the minutes, the original suggestion was, let's discuss this thing as a principle.
Hold on. But Nandalal said, this thing, tell me, in this minutes, Nandalal was there?
Nandalal was not there.
Okay.
Nandalal was not there. As a matter of fact, and I'm glad you raised the question, not a single member of the PPP was present when those sections, including those clauses, including clause 18, were discussed. Anyway, we've got hold on, just 2 minutes.
That's how we operate.
Yes,
how the select committee operates.
It's a failure. It's a failure of institutions. It's a gross failure. It's dereliction of duty. It is complete sellout by people like Ramjatan. Absolute sellout of his principle. And he was not the only AFC person on that select committee. He was not. These persons need to be exposed. The corrosive impact of power. 15 seconds each to close on Labor Day 2018. That was our topic.
Labor Day 2018.
15 seconds.
I'm encouraged by the turnout of those workers, and I believe that the message that has been sent, I don't believe that the government begin to read the tea leaves.
I think what has been said by Labour in particular on media should be taken very seriously, and it should form the basis for the parties to engage in social dialogue, which is enshrined within the Decent Work Country program, and also a notion that is part of an agreement by governments generally, right, as member states of the International Labour Organization. I believe that unless I said that the social partners can find some common ground in terms of how they will proceed I do not think that the potential of this country will be realized.
That would be grave misfortune for our country. I think we, as citizens, members of civil society, need to hold our politicians, Ramjatan et al., Nandalal, Gillian Burton was not there, Gillian Prasad skipped that meeting as well. She was not available. We have to get our institutions functioning. If our institutions do not function, companies like Rusal, companies like Esso Exploration and Production Limited, and ExxonMobil will continue to operate in our country without adequate regard for our legislation and our people. Mr. Lincoln Lewis, Mr. Norris Witter, thank you very much for participating in this discussion on Labor Day 2018. I would like to think that this is part of the social dialogue in which this country ought to be engaging as we seek to prevent any kind of decline, and rather to progress into a new Guyana. Thank you, good night, and see you next week.